I'm sorry. I was meant to just jump right into this, but we're having a laugh off screen. All right, here we go. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 10, Episode 9. Welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast. I am part of the ConcealedCarry.com network, brought to you by HK. I am your host, Jacob Paulson, and I'm joined today by Brian Doc McLaughlin. Doc is like like an honorary title that you earn as a corpsman?
It's kind of a big deal. Not everybody is a doc, although you might be a corpsman. It doesn't guarantee that you're a doc. It's a title that's earned, and your Marines W that. Generally, all corpsmen are docs, but when you're with your boys to prove yourself, when you start out, you're not a doc until you've kind of proven yourself and they accept you in. That's when they start calling you doc instead of corpsman.
So if you leave that unit and you go join a new unit, are you doc immediately now, or do you still have to be re-accepted?
If you're a high enough rank, I guess. If you've been around a little bit, then
there's an assumption that you know what's going on.
You know what's going on. But if you're a new guy and you haven't yet proved yourself, you know, they want to know that you're going to be there to take care of them.
Yeah.
And they go out and do this dangerous stuff. Like, is this guy going to hook us up, or is he just going to be a corpsman?
Yeah. We were you and I were on a range once. This is now a couple of years ago, and someone was calling you. They didn't remember your name, so they just were calling corpsman. Hey, corpsman, and you're just like, like, and I'm like, Brian. You're like, what? So like they're calling you. And then later you and I talked about it. I remember you telling me, like, no one's ever called me corpsman, like, ever. Like, it's been a long time since someone said, hey, corpsman.
I think probably the last time I got called corpsman was when I was getting yelled at by a gunny. When I was a new doc.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, what is wrong with you, corpsman? And I was like, offended. I was like, I would take away my title of doc. That's a big deal.
Well, there you have it, folks. I'm Jacob, and I am joined by Brian. Brian is the guy who earned the title Doc. So there you go. We might have to come back. Might have to bring back the guy who. That's an old school podcast tradition we haven't done in a long time. We're pretty stoked today. We got an interesting topic. This is something that those of you who've been around this community for a long time, this is probably something you've thought about. Maybe you've researched a little bit. Those who might be new at the concealed carry thing, this might not be something that was even on your radar. But we certainly do get plenty of questions. It does seem to be a conversation that comes up sometimes about, should you apply medical to your tacker? And I think there's a bigger conversation generally about medical and having it with you and the legal implications and ethical and moral considerations. But the most common, like, very specific question is, well, when I shoot dude, should I then render aid? So we're going to get into that fun stuff. But first, we do have some sponsor messages. First one's from Palm Pepper Spray. Brian, when was the last time you got sprayed by pepper spray?
Ooh, actually, I don't think I've ever been sprayed. I did the gas chamber in the with the Marines, of course, but they don't actually spray you.
It's just like a tear gas thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the first time ever I've done something cool that Brian's not done. So I've been sprayed by pepper spray, and I can tell you, it was not cool actually at all. It's miserable.
It is on my bucket list to get sprayed and then try to fight somebody. Like, do jujitsu.
I was going to volunteer until you finish the sentence.
Yeah, well, if you do, you can spray me. But
now I unvolunteer.
Then you got to wrestle me.
Well, I think our friend Mickey should spray you. That would be fun.
I'll wrestle Mickey.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be cool. All right, well, there it is. We'll set the appointment. So the point is, Palm Pepper Spray is awesomeness. The Palm has been making like the top quality aerosol spray containers for this country for like 100 years or something. Like, it's an old family business, and under a different name that you don't know. And then when they created Palm specifically to focus on pepper spray, because they were doing a lot of business with other name brand pepper spray companies, making the containers and stuff for them, they said, hey, let's create our own brand. And they kind of branched off and did that. And they've been highly successful. And everyone I know who I respect their opinion about self-defense uses Palm. Like, I just don't know anyone who's not using Palm. I'm sure there's people out there, and I'm sure that there's potentially other good brands. I'm not saying it's Palm or nothing, but it seems clear to me that as a guy who doesn't know everything about formulas and formulations, that people who do know stuff make it clear that they choose Palm.
Yeah.
So check it out, palmpepperspray.com. They got really good stuff. They do a lot of business on Amazon. If you want to order on Amazon, they got Prime stuff. They also have water inert trainers, which you have to dig a little bit deep on their website to find them. But I'm a huge fan of water inert trainers. I run into people all the time like, Jacob, I did the thing. I got the pepper spray just like you said I should. And I'm like, great. How far does it spray? I don't know. How wide is the spray? I don't know. Is it narrow? Is it wide? I don't know. And people don't know nothing because they're afraid to try it. And I don't blame them at all. I have no interest in testing my pepper spray. But buying some water inert ones allows you to then test how it performs, how far it'll spray, all those things without having to throw all your clothes in the garbage and cry for a day or two. So
Cry is a bit. When I was a corpsman, one of my primary duties is babysitting drunk Marines.
so many good stories come from that.
Very standard. And so working in the ER in 29 Palms, we would get these students from the local radio school. They didn't have a lot to do out there besides get drunk and fight. And so they would get drunk and go out and smash everything up. And then PMO, the military or the Marine Corps police would come and roll them up, and they would CS them. You know, they'd spray them in the face with that good stuff. And then they would have to come in to see us. So I had to wash out a lot of eyeballs and stuff with baby shampoo and things like that. And they're just snotting and spit and crying. It's rough stuff.
It doesn't look fun.
No,
it's not fun. So thank you, Palm, for sponsoring the Concealed Carry podcast. We think you have great products. Our other sponsor today is CCW Safe. So CCW Safe, in fact, we were talking about them today in our company meeting this morning and how amazing they are as a company and how much we respect the people over there and what amazing things they've done for our industry. Things that I'm not at liberty to talk about, and some things that are just personal, frankly, for our company. But I think that you just need to take a hard look at this. If today you're a member of a competitor of CCW Safe, I think you need to go take a hard look at what they offer, the benefits, and their track record in terms of how they take care of people compared to the competition. So for whatever that's worth, go learn more about them, ccwsafe.com. We do have a discount coupon code just from listeners of the podcast, which is CC Podcast. That's 10% off. If you're a member of Guardian Nation, you can save 20%. So check that out. All right. So our topic today, this is something that comes up. So I've thought about it a lot. People ask you this all the time, I imagine. So it just crossed your mind one time or two before. And I think that for me, this conversation starts with one core idea. And then it kind of branches out from there. Should I render aid to my attacker is a very specific question. If for one, it infers that you have some sort of trauma gear and that you have the knowledge and skill to apply it. Otherwise, it's sort of a non-starter. Like the question's irrelevant if you're not carrying or have no access to medical gear or you don't know how to use it. So there's an inference there that's a beginning point. And in my experience, this tends to be, well, let me describe it this way. If we kind of graphed, your standard pyramid graph, where there's kind of a lot of stuff at the bottom and it gets narrow at the top. If we graph that and said things that concealed carriers need to know or need to learn or need to have in order to be highly responsible concealed carriers, the medical thing tends to be pretty high up in the pyramid. I think that, and maybe that's changing. Maybe today is getting better. More and more people are getting educated on the importance of medical skills and gear earlier in their journey as concealed carriers. But I would reckon that there's some number of people who are listening to this who have never even considered carrying a trauma kit. So let's establish just some basic baselines here for that before we get into that, because I think that's important. And obviously something we've talked about on the podcast many times. We got our Navy corpsman here who's patched up kept much of blood inside of a human. And man, Brian's done some cool stuff. He doesn't like talking about it, but every once in a while he'll slip and he'll say something. You're like, whoa, what? So anyway, I'm sorry, that was a tangent. But I think we just need to establish as a baseline. So medical, how, it's important. To me, it went from being sort of like this ancillary thing that maybe crossed my mind once to being highly critical in a very short period of time. What would you say to somebody who today is getting going in their concealed carry journey and maybe is not yet seriously considered, having medical gear and training?
That's a great question. I think this is the one that I approach the most often because we're in this firearm industry. Everybody wants to be carrying that gat. Everybody wants to be John Wick and running through and smoke checking bad guys and all that stuff. And I get it. That's the cool stuff. And I am right there with you. I enjoy that aspect as well. But Combat is a multifaceted, very dangerous and dynamic endeavor. There's a lot of different stuff going on besides just running a gun. Bullets, beans, and bandages are the basic components that you need for logistics of warfighting. Beans aren't really big on our topic here, but we need bullets and bandages. If you have the tools to punch holes in people, you need the tools to patch holes in people. Because if you're sending bullets going that way, there's a good chance there's bullets coming this way. They're going to be punching holes in you, bystanders, and maybe your family members. So, as the defender of your home and your family, you are also the medic of your home and family. So having a basic understanding of how to use medical gear is extremely important for anybody studying self-defense. It's extremely important for anybody studying anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the one constant factor across every single category. It doesn't matter what your ideology is. It doesn't matter your political stance, your religion. None of that matters. Everybody agrees that everybody deserves medical.
Yeah.
No problem getting medical kits and trauma shears generally into sketchy locations, whereas a firearm won't be so readily available. So if you really want to make sure you're able to defend yourself, a trauma kit is probably going to be more useful than your firearm in the long run, especially.
Yeah, and I think you bring up good. I think there's two core things I'm going to summarize from your comment. The first is this idea that if gun fire, then medical likely needed, right? But there's the second half of what you said, which is just as critical, which is that medical is not a self-defense tool; it's an emergency preparedness tool. Right. So having a trauma kit in my truck, having one in my backpack, which is sitting right over here in this room, having one, some people wrapping them around their ankles and walking around, which I think is fabulous. Having a tourniquet in my pocket, having one attached to my range bag, having one on my bug out gear, having one in my vehicle, like that's not me being prepared for self-defense. That's me being prepared for medical emergencies. And now it happens to be that in a self-defense situation, there's likely to be a medical emergency. And so it just happens to be that the two have this overlap that causes it to be topical in the gun conversation. But the vast majority of people I know who have gone to the effort, who, to be medically prepared, to have the gear, to have the education, and had at some period of time in their life where they've been carrying a gun and had access to medical, the vast majority of those people would tell me that they've used the medical, but they've never used the gun. So there's also just this kind of statistical probability question of like, well, you're much more likely to need medical. So I think that's kind of just establishing this baseline. I just want to kind of establish that before we move on to this idea about, well, in the self-defense scenario, what about using medical? And you established one of the more important things too, and in your comments, Brian, when you said, well, if bullets are going that way, bullets are coming back this way. Because before we talk about applying medical to our attacker, there's got to be a question about applying medical to us and the innocent people, right? So if I don't have medical with me because I don't think I'll ever need to apply it to my attacker, that means I also don't have it to apply to me or to my family or to my buddy or these other random innocent strangers who are now victims of violence. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to assume that doesn't need to be said. I think like those are baseline critical things that have to be said before we dive into this idea of like, well, what about my attacker? Mm-hmm. Do we do something for them? So that's where I start out for me.
I think if you can use a trauma kit, the skills are not difficult to learn. Also, like shooting a handgun proficiently requires a significant amount of training, especially in an area where you are responsible for every bullet and where it lands. So being able to be trained well enough to do that proficiently and safely in a self-defense encounter is no small thing. I think a lot of people overlook a lot of average people overlook how important and how much training actually kind of goes into it. And medical, obviously, there's a lot that you can learn. People become doctors for this.
There's schools for this.
Yes. Yeah. But in an emergency situation, like what we're talking about in a self-defense encounter, the skills that you need are much, much lower.
Rudimentary, almost.
Much more rudimentary. Yeah.
yeah.
Basic things that you don't really have to study that long and hard in order to save somebody long enough for an ambulance to show up and take them to a hospital where a doctor can fix them. So learning these skills is not hard. The most important thing is to have the gear ready and available and know how to use them. So that's not very difficult to attain those kind of skills. You don't have to go to EMT school and that kind of stuff. At Mountain Man Medical, we have that free online trauma course, totally free, and it'll show you how to use the basic stuff, wound packing and tourniquets and that kind of thing. Lots of resources. YouTube is a great option for that as well. There's a lot of very knowledgeable subject matter experts who can walk you through some pretty in-depth parts of emergency medicine if you're interested.
Yeah.
So this information is not hard to get. You kind of want to stay on top of it, right? All skills are perishable. It's like a toolbox. A skill is a tool that you have to get out and resharpen to make sure that it's ready to go for you when you need it. Otherwise, it's just going to be sitting there getting dull and rusty. And when you pull it out, when the emergency happens, it's not going to be ready for you. So making sure that you keep this information at the top of your head, going back over it a couple of times a year, to make sure that you remember the details. That's, I think,
more than sufficient.
More than sufficient.
Yeah. Yeah. So, excellent. So I'm glad we established that. So the next place my mind goes in this conversation is about objectives, missions, priorities. You pick your word, frankly, because a lot of to put in context this idea of rendering aid, a medical aid to my attacker. I think the most important thing we have to ask is, well, what is your primary objective? And then what are your secondary and tertiary objectives in a self-defense scenario? Because in a self-defense scenario like if you're not thinking about this, then I think you have some mindset failures. I really do. I think understanding with great clarity your objective is mission number one as a concealed carrier. In fact, we've talked about this quite a bit. We had an episode, not that long ago, this season or last season, about focusing on the wrong person's outcome. That we talked about that. We did an episode maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago about what makes up a defensive mindset. We talked about different aspects of a defensive mindset, but understanding your objective and priority, I think, is the number one thing. So in a self-defense situation where there's a risk of death or serious bodily injury to myself, to random innocent humans, or to loved ones potentially, or friends, what is the number one objective? What is the number one most important thing for most of us? And to each their own. But I think Brian, what's the number one objective?
Survival.
Yes, right. For you, and presuming there's people you care about at some level, for those people to make it out alive. That's the number one objective. So with that context in mind, I think there's two relevant things to our topic, and this is kind of where I'm going to start pushing us down the road here. The first one is having medical furthers my ability to achieve my number one objective. Right? If my number one objective is me walking away alive and potentially some other really important people to me, my kids, my wife, something like that, then having medical maximize my ability to make sure we survive. Because if I have to apply aid to me or to family, then that's necessary for my primary objective. So I need to have medical and I need to have training to do that. So that, and I know we've kind of already established that, but I want to make sure we're talking this in the context of the mission, the objective, the priority. But the second place we have to take this is if I've stopped a threat somehow, there's any number of ways that threats can be stopped. Mm-hmm. They can be physically basically set up so they no longer physically capable. They've been rendered incapable of continuing a physical attack. They can also be psychologically stopped, right? I think an attacker can just decide that it's no longer advantageous for them to continue an attack. That happens more often than you think. So for whatever way, if I've stopped an attacker, right, am I jeopardizing my primary objective, or am I increasing and working toward my primary objective if I approach that person to apply aid? That's my first question. And I think the answer is super obvious. Probably I'm jeopardizing my primary objective under most circumstances, right? If I've stopped an attacker, if that attacker has been neutralized in some capacity at this point in time, then me saying I'm going to go check if that person needs some chest seals is probably jeopardizing my primary objective. So So that's my first hurdle here is, can I consider rendering aid to this person without it jeopardizing my primary objective? Yes, no.
I would say we all, um, I think there's two parts of that, because one, we want to also establish why someone would want to or not want to apply.
Sure.
So we're talking a little bit about why we would maybe not want to, but there might also be some people out there that be like, what the heck? Why are we even talking about this? Of course you wouldn't.
Well,
Why
yeah.
would somebody want to apply?
I think it meets many secondary objectives.
Yeah. And I think a part of that is sometimes I feel like people are worried that in court, because this will eventually get to court, somebody will ask them, you had medical on you, and so you shot this guy and you didn't use this medical kit to save them. Why not? You know, like, you clearly hate this person and you wanted this person to die. This was a malicious intent. You are a malicious person. You know, you are trying to cause this massive harm to somebody. And I think a lot of people really want to shy away from that, partially because it's not true, but also because they don't want that, that being leveled at them. And I think part of the thing is that you're going to be asked that question. If you're going to have somebody who's going to say that, and you need to have a ready response for that. Being able to talk to a lot of my cop friends, one of the things that they talk about is you should be able to articulate your actions in a way that confers that this is something that a reasonable person would do in this situation, right? So I should be able to say, if somebody says, why did you shoot that person? I should be able to say, articulate a reasonable answer that a reasonable human being would probably say as well. And I might say something along the line as, I was worried for the life of my children. And a reasonable person would be like, oh, that makes sense. An unreasonable answer might be, he called me a name I didn't like. A reasonable person would probably would not do that. So you would be much more likely to be held accountable for these types of actions. So we want to be articulating why we're doing a thing or why we did a thing. And the articulation in this particular circumstances are, one, why didn't you apply aid to this person? Thinking about that ahead of time will help you articulate that in the future. I didn't apply aid because of these reasons. And that also goes into the category of, should you or should you not apply aid? And so there are some people out there who say maybe we should, because I'm not carrying this gun because I really want to kill somebody. I just want to stay alive. I don't want to kill somebody. That's not my goal. I just want to make sure I'm alive. And so people will say, hey, I want to apply that aid because I would feel bad having killed somebody. And that would be a hard thing to get past.
Yeah. So we have to have some foundational understanding of how the legal side of this applies, because one of the biggest things that gets me a little bit batty in our community is when people will say something like, well, X can be used against you in court,
right,
or X can't be used against you in court. Like, that drives me nuts. In fact, we have a great episode on this in the podcast. You can go back and find it. I did an interview with Don West about this very topic. I think the name of that episode is "What Can and Can't Be Used Against You in Court." And, teaser, anything can be used against you in court. And in fact, a prosecutor is going to use everything available to them if they're any good at their job. Let me give you some examples. In the George Zimmerman trial, the prosecutor brought up to the jury, pointed out to the jury that he was carrying hollow points, and tried to imply that was premeditated taking of a life. Well, in the Rittenhouse trial, the prosecutor brought up the point that he was using full metal jackets and implied that was premeditated, that he was going to take a life. Well, if you're like, well, crap, then what do I like? The point is, it doesn't matter, because a prosecutor will use anything that they can get away with using. Obviously, there's a hearing in advance where some amounts where there's going to be a conversation about evidence, what evidence can and can't be brought before trial. Judges make those decisions. No, this isn't, for any number of reasons they might say this evidence can't be presented. But dang near nothing is going to prevent a prosecutor from trying to paint a narrative about the fact that you did or didn't have medical on you, that you did or didn't use medical. I mean, you mentioned the potential harm of, well, you had medical and you didn't use it. Does that imply you wanted that person to die? Well, how about this? You had medical and you used it. Does that imply consciousness of guilt, which is a legal doctrine that suggests that that maybe because then you went to save that life, that was a way of you admitting that you did something wrong. You recognizing, oh crap, I shouldn't have shot this person. So now rendering aid, potentially I'm implying my own guilt by showing that I'm trying to save that person's life. The takeaway here, like if I'm starting to feel like I'm spinning in circles, the takeaway is not, can it be used against you in court? Assume everything you do is going to be used against you, regardless of which decision you make. To have medical, to not have medical, to have medical training, to not have medical training, to apply medical to yourself, to apply it not to yourself, to apply it to the attacker, to not apply it to the attacker. Whatever you make of any of those decisions, I assure you, that's up for grabs for the prosecutor to paint into the narrative that you're a bad person, what you did was wrong. So you need to let go immediately any sense of like, well, that could be used against me, therefore I won't do it. Irrelevant. The correct question to be asking is, if that's used against me, do I have a reasonable articulation of why it's okay? And will my attorney be able to attack that part of the narrative? So if the prosecutor gets up and says, well, this guy had hollow points and that's, premeditated, whatever, is my attorney going to be able to bring in some subject matter expert or somebody else to the stand that says, well, hollow points are freaking standard. Well, we'd like every cop carries hollow points. Everybody carries, like in, the class, the curriculum that we teach concealed carriers that George Zimmerman took, it talks about how like hollow points is the preferred ammunition. In fact, here's the instructor who taught him the class and told him that, right? So if oh my gosh, you had medical and you didn't apply it, okay, well now we got to get on the stand. We got to talk about like, well, what are the safety considerations that would keep someone from applying aid? And why would that be reasonable and expected and normal? And in fact, use that in my advantage. That's my attorney's job. Oh, you used aid and you applied to this person. That's consciousness of guilt. Well, now my attorney's got to get up and he's got to explain, no, that doesn't mean that he's admitting he's guilty. Jacob has had this training and he really cares about human life. And he, here's examples of things he's been taught and in the training he's received. This podcast has been and could be subpoenaed for evidence if you listen to it. So it's not, can that be used against me? And that line of thinking is inherently flawed. The correct question is, if it's used against me, how easy will it be to counter that argument?
Yeah. And guys, don't forget, we're not lawyers. Me and Jacob are just very handsome men on the internet. We don't actually know anything about the law. If you need some law advice, especially in this category, I absolutely check out CCW Safe. They are the subject matter experts on these types of things. But I think what you said is very well said. The legal problem is going to be there. So you have to counteract that and be ready for that. And making sure that you're always operating from a position of righteousness will ensure that, let these things go. It's no big deal. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. There's no reason to escalate things. Being a warrior means understanding when and where to fight. You need to pick your terrain and the timing correctly. And if you're just picking a random time because you're pissed off and you had a bad day and you're popping off at somebody, that's a good way to get yourself into these bad situations. So let stuff go, and that'll help out a lot.
Yeah.
I think the next thing that we also, so we talked about the legal stuff, and I imagine that'll kind of pop back up into the conversation.
Well, I have another legal thought.
Okay.
If you want to do that now.
Yeah, let's do it now.
This is probably another one that doesn't get enough attention and might fly in the face of some people's training or education or what they might consider conventional wisdom. But I feel very strongly about this. You are way better off if your attacker lives than if they die. In a number of ways, but let's focus on the legal one since that's where I said I was going. If my attacker, if I shoot, stop, do something to render my attacker incapable of continuing the attack and they die, and I go to court, we're assuming there's going to be some trial. What are the potential charges? Murder, manslaughter, homicide. None of those are good. But if they live, what are my potential charges? Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, felony menacing, probably aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. This would be if I utilize the gun. So which of those would I rather be charged with? I'd much rather be facing charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon than manslaughter. Like, there's no question in the world. Like, you're way better off. Now, there are a lot of the conventional wisdom out there that's been flying for however many decades that just makes me a little bit sick inside. Is this idea of like, well, but if there's only one story that can be told, right? Dead men don't speak. Like, you go ask any attorney with their salt if that's how they see it, and they're going to be like, okay, I'm sure there's exceptions. There might be attorneys who absolutely feel like, yes, like we'd rather have one story to that flies into the courtroom than two. Okay, like that's a potential argument. Maybe there's an attorney out there who feels that way. I don't know any of those attorneys. I think at large, attorneys are going to say, well, I'd actually just rather be facing lower charges because it gives me way more options. I mean, in most states, even if you're convicted of aggravated assault, you potentially could just go on probation. You might not even serve jail time. But if you're convicted of manslaughter, you think you're avoiding jail time? Like, you have so much more flexibility in the plea deal, in the arraignment. Like, everything is better for you if you're dealing with the person surviving. Think about civil repercussions, civil legal repercussions. Would you rather be facing a lawsuit about injuring somebody, even in a way that might cause irreparable harm for the rest of their lives, or killing somebody? Well, you might be thinking dead people don't sue. Well, then you're ignorant. You're clueless. Wrongful death suits are a thing. People's estates sue all the time. I have a brother who's an estate lawyer, and ask me if he's ever been involved in lawsuits over dead people, for dead people. It happens all the time. So you'd much rather be facing a lawsuit over having injured and maimed somebody, by far, than be facing a lawsuit over having someone die. The potential damages and payout is going to be way more substantial if your attacker dies. So there's a really clear argument in favor of rendering aid. Is just simply put, you'd much, in my opinion, much rather your attacker live and survive than die.
Yeah, this concept of dead men tell no tales.
It's ridiculous.
If there's only one witness, then there can only be one story. That if you are the type of person who says that, we can't be friends. There is no world in which you and I can be friends on any level. To me, that is incredibly ridiculous. If you're operating from a position of integrity, then you don't have to only have that one story. I mean, they're going to have their own story anyway, no matter what. Everybody's going to have their own story. And something that I feel is an important ethos to live by is that which can be destroyed by the truth should be. And if I can be destroyed by the truth, I should be. So yeah, keep yourself righteous. Keep your ego in check, and then this will be far less of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we do see people who make good decisions and who are innocent who do get persecuted, prosecuted, and on a rare occasion even convicted because of a lack of good evidence or a crappy attorney or any number of issues there. So it's not black and white, but yes, if we act on good moral high ground, then it's my belief that 99 times out of 100, certainly, you're way better off in legal fight if they live than if they die. So that's an argument in favor. I'm not saying that I for sure jump on that person and start putting on tourniquets. I'm not going there yet. I'm just trying to point out some potential arguments in favor of rendering aid. Mm-hmm. Right, that I'm just better off if the person doesn't die. Legal things aside for a second, let's just talk about psychological issues. Would I rather live with the fact that I just took a life, or would I rather live with the idea that I injured somebody, potentially maimed somebody, but in defense of myself or loved one? Well, I'd much rather deal with having just injured somebody than having killed somebody. That seems no-brainer-ish in terms of my own psychological health as well, aside from the moral, ethical, and of course the legal things we already talked about. I just feel strongly that there's a rare circumstance, if any at all, where you'd rather that person die. It just doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. Not to mention, you might be a bad person. I'm not sure for thinking that. It's like, are we now convicting people to death? No, we're convicting them to no longer carrying out this attack against us. And what happens after that is not entirely our problem or our concern. However, if they don't die, that's better for us, in my opinion. I guess I should get off my little soapbox now.
I think it's better for everybody involved.
Definitely better. Definitely better for everybody.
It's better for that person who's been shot.
Yeah.
There are so many stories of criminals who have recovered and become excellent human beings because they were almost killed doing something they shouldn't have been, and this was their new start on life. Now, that doesn't, of course, happen across the board,
No.
but everybody deserves a second chance. Everybody deserves to come back to the fold and to be good
Yeah.
human beings. Jacob says no.
No, I think I think that what people deserve is a fair trial, and I think that what people deserve is justice. And I don't think that me deciding if they should live or die is justice.
Right.
I just don't think it's my place. I just think it's in my benefit if they live.
All right. I think yeah. And my point was just that I think it's in everybody's benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Both from a selfish perspective and a moral, ethical one, and from a legal one, like in every possible respect, it's better if they live. Okay, so I'm going to now backtrack a little bit. I've just gotten on this whole high horse about how definitely for sure it's better if they live, and I won't take that back. However, that's still a secondary objective or a tertiary objective for me. But it's still not my primary objective. My primary objective is my survival of my loved ones. So am I willing to jeopardize that objective, my survival of my loved ones, by rendering aid? The answer is probably not. I'm not. Now, let me just take it aside for a second. Let me just take us on a slightly different train track for a minute. What about law enforcement? I'm not a cop. I have no badge. Brian, no badge?
No badge.
No badge. So neither of us have badges, okay? And so just for a minute, imagine if you're a cop, okay? We see on the regular cops render aid to BGs, bad guys and bad gals. On the regular, we see cops, involved in a officer-involved shooting, and then they immediately go and apply aid to the person they just shot. We see that on the regular. I mean, you want, like, there's YouTube channels dedicated to that for sure. So we see it all the time. So cops do it. Now, a couple of considerations there. First is cops are not us. Like, cops have different obligations. They have a job. They have responsibilities based on that duty that the rest of us do not have. So let's recognize that first and foremost. Depending on the department, they might have policies and procedures or any number of things that I imagine are not universal across the board. They also have restraints. They have handcuffs. They're generally not alone. There's other additional officers nearby. So how does that impact? Like, how does that make their situation maybe different than mine?
I like so we talked about the legal and moral, ethical kind of aspects. So now we're starting to get into the tactical part of things.
Yes.
So this is the tactical idea. So now we are approaching this situation from the tactics mindset. How one of the most important things. All right, let me start off a little bit. So this is something that is very important for the tactical medic world, because you're essentially in defensive shootings constantly as a tactical medic, and you have to be able to deal with that. As the medic in your team or in your area of operation, you are one of the most important people around there. You have important skills and gear and equipment. And if I die, then as a tactical medic, then I have put my team at a severe disadvantage, right? So if I die as a defender of my family is at a significant disadvantage without me. So it's very important for me to try to stay alive if at all possible. And something that we need to be paying attention to is that we need to keep ourselves safe at all times. And if I am the only person providing security in this situation, because I'm the person with the skills and the weapons, then I don't have a safe environment for me to apply this medical attention. My goal as the medic is not to jump on somebody and save their life at the moment that they're hurt. My goal is to get that person to a safer location where it's safe for me to take care of them. I don't want to have my head down trying to fix somebody while there's something crazy potentially going on. In the case of maybe a defensive shooting, if I shoot this person and then I immediately run over and try to start rendering aid, my eyes are down and taking care of this person. So I am not up and looking around at my dangerous environment. my eyes are down and set. Maybe he's got a partner I didn't see. A lot of the times these rats hunt in packs, right? And if he's got a partner, it's walking up behind me. I don't see them. That puts me at a significant tactical disadvantage. If I was on a team with guys in a ring with weapons out, I might feel much more safe and confident to divert my eyes away from the environment to take good care of my person. But as a solo defender, I don't have any kind of assurance, no backup or security. It's just me out here. And approaching that person is extremely dangerous to myself and my family if they happen to be here where I'm defending them. So approaching them is not a good idea. On top of that, this person, if you've shot them in a way that you're trained, they're going to be losing a lot of blood. Their brain isn't going to be working correctly at all. And even if this is somebody that this is not a defensive shooting. This is just a normal person who has lost a lot of blood. Could be somebody that you know and love and respect. Their brain isn't going to be working correctly because it's not getting the oxygen that it needs because of the blood loss. So they still pose a significant risk to you. If you're working on somebody who has a gun on them or a knife, even if that's a person that you trust and respect, we need to make sure that we disarm them because they're not going to be using their brain right, and they could make a dangerous decision. So your threat could not only come from just your attacker, it could come from the person that you're trying to help too. If you're running up to take care of a police officer that's down on the ground and they wake up to you putting on a tourniquet, they don't know who you are. They might think you're the gangbanger coming over to put one extra in them. They draw and they can take you out. That is a totally reasonable thing that could happen in a dangerous situation. So keeping ourselves safer is important. If we get injured, then we're not doing anybody any good and we're making the situation much worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love everything you said. I think I would summarize it kind of with this core thought for me, which is rendering aid to my attacker is in all respects primarily a good thing if I'm able to do it with 100% confidence. I'm not jeopardizing my primary objective. If I can do it with 100% confidence, then I'm not putting myself or those I'm trying to defend in any additional harm or danger. So the question kind of comes down to, well, then, like, when would that happen? Like, what are those circumstances? And I think you brought up a lot of very specific good points. Things like, well, removing potential weapons from them, if I can. I think also I'll give you some additional thoughts, like me not being alone. Like, if I'm alone, if it's just me, I'm the only active defender here, and I got my attacker and he's bleeding and stuff. I can't imagine a way that I could go render aid that wouldn't jeopardize me. Like, I just can't imagine, like, how I could do that on my own. Because I think it's at least a 2-man job. Like, someone's going to have to provide some cover. Someone's going to have to restrain this person if at all possible. Someone's, it's going to require probably multiple people. But I could imagine it happening. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. Let's say, for example, I'm in the shopping mall. Let's just pretend I've been in a shopping mall. I hate shopping malls. Anyway, they do often have really good pretzels and cookies. But beyond that, they don't have a lot of redeeming qualities. But if I'm in a shopping mall in the food court, an active shooter guy comes in, starts shooting a bunch of people, and bang, 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 we respond, drop that threat, and we're sort of like, what's going on? And everyone's kind of clearing out, and they're screaming, and everyone's kind of gone. And I'm looking, I'm like, dude's definitely down. There's his gun right there. It's in his hand, or he's right next to him. And I got 2 or 3 other people now, and we're all kind of looking, and they're like, dude, I'm a medic, or I'm an EMT, what should we do? And I'm like, okay, like, there could be a world where with the right people, I mean, if it was you and me, I'd feel very confident. Like, all right, Brian, like you cover, like, I'll secure the dude, we go in, maybe tie up his hands with something, flip that dude over, be like, all right, let's pat him down. Let's get out any of the knives, the sharp stuff, the gun, move it out of the situation. Cool. Let's grab the med kit. Let's get to work on this dude. Like, so there's definitely a world where it could be done. And when I watch, your average law enforcement body cam where they do it, they tend to be pretty dialed in on this stuff. They the officers who are doing this tend to have some degree of training, and that's what you see them do. You see them come in, gun out, like, dude poses a new threat, like, I'm gonna drop him like a rock, right? But we got a couple officers. We're removing weapons, put handcuffs on that dude. Now we've secured the scene. We got a couple dudes who are up. They're covering. They're watching the environment. I'm down on the ground. Dude's no longer a threat. Been restrained. Doesn't have any more weapons on him. Boom. Tourniquet's going on. So could that happen? Yes, I suppose so. But it would seem to be a less likely scenario.
Yes. Now, I think there's two things there that I want to hit on primarily that you were talking about. And the first one was the tactical medic. And then it's also, I want to talk a little bit about active shooter trauma medicine because I got some deep thoughts on that one.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So it's important to kind of, I like to describe to people like what does it look like being a medic in a stack? If you're a tactical medic in a stack and you're going to go and push an event, what are you doing and how are you doing it? And primarily, I'm a shooter. My goal is preventative medicine. Preventative medicine means you shoot the bad guy. If I can shoot the bad guy, I don't have to use my medical skills to fix my buddies, right? So I'm not stopping shooting the bad guy to go and fix Jacob if he goes down, right? If we are on a team and we are aggressing to go shoot that bad guy, I'm going to step over Jacob and I'm going to keep moving on. Now, I might do a quick one or two things that are kind of key to tactical medics for a different topic and a different time, but that's not my goal. My goal is not to fix Jacob. My goal is to stop that threat.
Prevent more Jacobs.
Prevent more Jacobs from happening, right? That's preventative medicine. I am preventing injuries from occurring by injuring somebody.
Ending the threat. Yeah.
Ending the threat. So this is an important concept here. So we are not trying to take care of that person now because it's not safe to do it. If I stop what I'm doing to try to work on Jacob, I'm not helping with this bad situation. And there's a good chance it'll get much, much worse. So we need to kind of think along those lines because you can't do this if you don't have a teammate. Now, if you have a teammate, and it's even better if you happen to have a competent teammate, because there's a lot of times where you won't. You will just have some random dude who offers help, which is better than nothing. But at the same time, if you've got a competent teammate, your chances for survival dramatically and significantly skyrocket through the roof. I don't care who you are or what kind of background you have. There's no such thing as a real John Wick. All of our top level elite bubbas are operating at least teams of two. Like our top level military guys, the best trained on the planet, they at least have one other teammate that's looking out for them. This is super important.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be trying to run up to take care of a bad guy who is a significant threat and risk to me, especially when I have no security. I have no idea what else is going on around me, and this could change at any moment. And a bad situation can very quickly get worse and worse and worse and worse. So we're trying to minimize that. We're trying to have operational risk management. What is my end goal, and how much risk can I safely take in order to accomplish that mission or goal?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I just had this weird, interesting thought. I was thinking about your military experience and thinking about how on a battlefield, medics are supposed to be non-combatants, right? In fact, historically, medics generally were complete non-combatants. And now we live in kind of more of a modern military where medics are combatants until they're non-combatants.
Well, I hope no politicians are watching this because that's totally against the Geneva Convention.
But everyone does it.
Medics are, no, technically.
Okay, backtrack, Jacob. Backtrack.
Does it happen? Yes. Do they do it? No, they don't, because politics don't allow it. So according to the Geneva Convention, if you are a medic, you are a non-combatant. However, you do carry weapons, right?
Yes.
And the idea behind this is the reason why is because those weapons are intended to defend your casualties.
Okay.
So the idea is like you're being overrun in your position at the base hospital.
Yes.
You have a weapon to defend your casualties.
Okay. So there's some context. There's a little flexibility in that context. Maybe
it depends on how you're defending your casualties
or future casualties.
Yeah. If I'm jumping on this Mark 19 or I'm shooting an RPG to defend my casualties, I don't know. So it's a kind of a loose kind of gray area, but the correct total term, according to the Geneva Convention and international law, is no. Medics are not combatants. In fact, if you join something like the Special Forces or the Navy SEALs, I would drop my title of corpsman and medic and pick up their designation, which labels me as a combatant.
Sure, with some medical training.
Yeah.
Completely irrelevant to our topic, but
Sure.
I thought it was really fun to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm always learning more stuff about these military dudes. There's just like this weird whole different world. And anyway, so I think that we've covered a lot of key considerations. I think the takeaways here are important. So let's just do some quick summary. First thought, I think, and I know it's kind of came last in our conversation. But I'm gonna flip around and make it like the number one consideration here is, if I'm going to render aid, I have to be able to do it in a way that absolutely 100% can be done safely. So I got to have a high degree of confidence that the attacker or whoever I'm rendering aid to, I'm doing it in a way that maximizes my own survival. So that might mean I can't do it or at all. It might mean that I need help. It might mean that only after a certain threshold is crossed is it reasonable or doable. But I think that's kind of my number one spot. That's where I start. But some other important considerations here. I'd much rather this person live. That's better for me in terms of the potential legal consequences. I also think it's better for me in terms of the legal narrative. That's a Jacob opinion. Like I said, anything can be used against you, but I'd rather them use against me, hey, you tried to save this dude after you shot him, than them use against me, you shot this dude and you ran off even though you had a trauma kit, you didn't do anything. So I'll err on the side of defending rendering aid if I can do it safely, right? That would be my choice. And I'd much rather face consequences that come with harming, injuring, and maiming people than taking people's lives, both criminally and civilly. So I think that's really, really important. And then I think also we have to just remember that despite any of this consideration, we have to remember that having medical gear and being trained to use it maximizes my ability to achieve my primary objective, which is to save my life and the lives of the innocent people with me who are potentially taking knife wounds, slashing wounds, gunshot wounds, any number of things. So I'm certainly not going to neglect medical entirely because I think that I either would never render aid or because I think that it could go against me in the narrative. It's like screw the narrative. The number one priority is living through this thing. The secondary or the tertiary objectives might be like winning the legal battle.
Yeah, and I don't know if we've got enough time for it now, or maybe we do. But I guess we could talk about active shooter trauma medicine.
Yes, let's dig into that. So you mentioned you had some thoughts there, and I painted that picture a little bit when I talked about shopping mall, the food court scenario, something like that. In fact, when my head too, as I was talking, I was thinking about Alicia Ketter. So Alicia and I are not close friends. I don't have her cell phone number. I can't text her. Maybe she'll be watching this. We did interview her on this podcast many moons ago, and my mind went to her because at the Las Vegas incident, she was not armed. There was no guns allowed in the venue, but she was there as a concert goer person, and she had a backpack on her with a bunch of medical gear. And in fact, there's a famous kind of AP Associated Press picture that went viral at the time of her because she was basically transporting victims from a place of vulnerability to a safe place where she could render aid, and then she was rendering aid as much as she could, and she saved several lives that night. From my perspective, and from what I know. So if that's what was in my head to some degrees, we were talking about this, is that she was unable to shoot back in her situation, but she was able to safely render aid to several people. What else are you thinking?
Well, I think that's an important concept. Is sometimes a lot of people get this concept of they can only be a hero if they have a weapon, and you can get a lot more accomplished. You can get a lot accomplished with some medical gear and some basic understanding of how to use it and how to improvise things, right? You can't carry all the medical gear that you need. She had a backpack full of stuff, and I'm guessing she probably used most, if not all of it. I would probably guarantee that. So the odds of you having a low amount and not enough equipment is going to be standard. This is an emergency. You're not going to have the resources, the time, or the help or the backup to handle all this stuff. You're going to be caught off guard, and at the worst possible point of the storm.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the standard. That's what makes this an emergency. It's terrible. So if we can plan for that stuff in the future, if we can kind of have some of those good skills in our back pocket, where we can handle that kind of stuff, that's where we're going to get the most benefit. Skills are weightless, but gear takes up a lot of space, especially medical gear. And in an active shooter situation, there's a good chance, even if you've got a fully stocked ambulance with you, show up on scene, you're probably going to run out of stuff. So that's an important concept. And also, I would like to say a few things about, the cautioning people against the idea of approaching an active shooter situation. I know a lot of people who envision themselves as defenders running into an active shooter situation and solving it with their weapon. And that's admirable, but also I don't feel like a lot of people understand how incredibly complex and dangerous that is. There are reasons why special forces and these kind of bubbas like to attack targets with lots and lots of people, at least teams of 6 to however many, right? The more people that you have, the better. And if it's only you, the odds of your survival drop dramatically. So you want to be thinking about that. If this is not a light thing to be thinking like, oh yeah, I've got a gun and I've taken a couple of classes, I'm going to go handle this situation. There's a lot of training that kind of really needs to go into that for you to be able to handle something like that confidently. So thinking along those lines is important, but also medical. A lot of times people think about stepping over people as they're running into this situation. They enter in that front door, they're hearing shots going off, and there's people littered everywhere. What do you do and where do you start? If we think about tactical medicine, what's our primary goal? Preventative medicine. I got to end that threat. Current police procedures, and this is for police, so everybody else has to make their own decisions on where they stand with this and what they're going to do. I don't get to make that decision for you. But current police procedures are, they don't wait for SWAT team to show up. They immediately aggress that target. When they hear gunfire, they just run to wherever the sound of that gunfire is. If there is no gunfire, then you have to stop and methodically clear your way through that building because you don't know where the threat is anymore. And that takes a lot of time. And while you're doing that, people are bleeding out. Unfortunately, that's the hard part of this type of a situation, is that you might be stepping over people who are screaming at you to save them and to help them. And it will be a difficult thing for you to ignore that and to move on with the goal of that preventative medicine. But that's important. We have to stop that threat first. If we have the option or the opportunity after that, we're confident that that threat is secure, then we can turn our attention to taking care of the casualties. And hopefully we have some medical gear available, but there's a good chance you're not going to have that much. So learning some basic skills on how to improvise, some basic leadership skills so that you can direct people to assist you. Pretty often you will be the only leader in this situation, and you will need to organize and inspire the bystanders around you to help you out. So if you are listening to this podcast, it is likely going to be you and no one else. You are probably the one that's going to be the only person doing something. So start thinking along those lines. Start putting yourself in the mode of leadership. How can you motivate people to get things accomplished so that you're not doing this all alone? And maybe we could have a podcast in the future that gets a little more depth into active shooter trauma medicine, because this gets a lot deeper. But I think those are the thoughts that I had to say on this particular topic.
Yeah, no, I dig all that. I think that's all really good. I think it's about perspective. I think it's about deciding, what am I willing to risk my life for? And some of you might be thinking, hey, I'll risk my life for any random stranger. No problem. Like, happy to die in service of defending random humans I don't know, in which case I'll be that guy. I'll charge in. Cool, man. If that's you, it's all good. You might be thinking, hey, I'm not really, like, I want to help, but I'm not willing to risk my life. Okay, well, then that maybe just changes how you help. Maybe instead of running in blindly, you're being methodical, you're using cover properly, you're doing what needs to be done. Or maybe you're just rendering aid on the sidelines. I don't know. But I think that some forethought is the point here. That's considering, who are you, what you're willing to do, what you're willing to risk what for. Those are important considerations.
Sometimes the best thing that you can do to help is to not run in there and make things worse.
True.
Sometimes being a good reporter is an incredibly valuable asset. Being able to describe exactly what's going on and where you're at is a good skill to have, especially in a very tense situation. If you can practice that ahead of time, just stop in the middle and be like, okay, if I had to tell somebody exactly where I'm at right now and what's going on, how would I do that? That's a great skill to have, because passing on that information and getting more people there with more guns and more medical equipment and more skills is very important.
Yeah, super well said. I also liked another comment you made, you've made it several times, but I just want to remind everybody as well that this episode is really, our primary topic was this idea of, should you apply medical to your attacker? We also have to bear in mind that it could be dangerous to apply medical aid to a loved one or to a stranger in these kinds of environments. So all that has to be done as safely as we can do it, if we choose to do it at all. So those are all valid considerations. Thanks.
Operational risk management.
Yes.
What are we trying to achieve? What is the level of risk, and how can we reduce that risk to a more manageable level so that we can accomplish our mission?
Yeah. Super well said. It's like he's been trained on this stuff or something.
It's like I know stuff.
All right, folks, that's a wrap. A reminder to check out our sponsors from today: Palm Pepper Spray and CCW Safe for your self-defense coverage, insurance stuff thing, whatever we call that now. Thank you for being here. Also, an honorary sponsor, Mountain Man Medical. We've been talking a lot about medical today. We talked about both gear and training, and mountainmanmedical.com provides both. You can buy the highest quality training there at the best price. Training gear. You can get the highest quality trauma gear there at the best price, and you can get some free online video training, as well as a whole bunch of good other short and long form videos on the Mountain Man Medical YouTube channel, which are primarily with this guy. So go check that out. Thanks, everyone, for being with us today. Be sure to like and share this podcast with other defenders that you know. Leave us a review. Send us an email if you want, podcast@concealedcarry.com, with feedback, suggestions, or anything else we could be doing better or anything like that. Happy to receive those comments. And until next time, a reminder: train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care, everyone.